Supply chain has been buzzing with talk of generative AI for at least 2 years. However, in September 2025, the tone has shifted just a little bit. Now people are asking a slightly different question. What difference has it made? And a subsequent question, has that difference been positive or negative? Now, today's guest, Knut Alicke, joins Joannes and me in studio in Paris to discuss that very issue. Now, Knut is partner emeritus at McKinsey. He's been teaching supply chain management for over 25 years. And most impressively, he's really good at the saxophone. Now, before we get into the discussion, you know the drill. If you like what we do at Lokad and you want to support us, follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And with that, I give you today's conversation with Knut Alicke. Knut, thank you for joining us. It's great to have you in studio now. I think this is your third appearance on Lokad TV.
Yes, I think so too. And the first time to be here in person, so really great to be here.
And you're actually the first person to sit on the new Lokad couch, you and Joannes breaking it in, professionally, of course. Well, to get started, Knut, I'm sure a lot of people already know you. You're partner emeritus, at McKinsey. You've taught supply chain science and supply chain management for 25 years. So my first question, set the table. Where do you also find time to play the saxophone?
That's a very good question. I am kind of going back. I really enjoyed playing the saxophone, and I spent my army time in the band, and that's where I kind of got excited to practice much more than the normal students. And I try to keep my level, and this is kind of practicing during the night or practicing over the weekend, and making sure that you always have a band that kind of keeps you busy.
I'm just writing down. You played music in the army, so you've lived quite a few lives, actually. In fact, does that actually influence the way you approach business and supply chain?
I don't think so. So I was too young to be influenced by that. Back then, I was 19, and I just enjoyed 1 year of practicing from the morning till the night, and then enjoying very nice concerts in Hamburg. That's where I kind of enjoyed going to a lot of jazz concerts and improving.
Oh. Well, I think we're all fans of jazz here, but we're also fans of generative AI, which I think is actually what brought us together in the studio. So, Joannes and I will come to you in a moment, but first, Knut, to set the table. I think I'll pitch you a statement and then a question, and then you can go. So the statement is, the supply chain, and I would say the world overall has been buzzing with generative AI for at least, let's say, 2 years. It has changed the supply chain landscape. That's the statement. And the question is, do you agree with that? And if yes, has it made it better or worse?
So I would say it has not significantly changed yet.
Mm-hmm.
So what I see is that GenAI will significantly change the way we do manage and operate supply chains.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's kind of, I always compare it to the invention of the container, right? So there was also something where
the shipping container.
The shipping container, exactly. That's something that where kind of the global flows of goods did change significantly. It was much more efficient. Was easier, right? It was standardized, and I see that now with GenAI we are at a similar point in time.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, it's something that is clearly hyped these days. And that is, I feel that people always overestimate the impact of a new technology in the short term, and they underestimate it in the long term. So if you just kind of look into what is possible these days with GenAI, so all of us use ChatGPT. And if you think about what is possible here in supply chain to help to kind of improve the performance of supply chains, make life of planners much easier, then there's a lot we will see in the next couple of years. But we also need to say that, hey, it's just kind of early days. It has only been 2 years, right? And the models are improving so much. So it will change, and I'm sure we will go more into detail on examples and so on later on.
Well, Joannes, do you agree with Knut? It's been for the better or for the worse?
I would say very clearly for the better. But it is still very small. So you see, the small pieces are, I think, are very good. Those tools are extremely useful. Right now, we are talking of essentially people using ChatGPT on the side to speed run something that would have been a very clerical task, and that is very good. Models have been progressing enormously. The fact that you have bigger context means that you can upload fairly long document and say, please find in this agreement if there is a term specific to this and that and that. In the past, scanning these 50 pages document would have taken you an hour to find if this part is discussed, and here you can have it in like half a minute. So I would say it is very much something that is good. Then we shall see for the future, because we will have. I very much agree with your statement. The impact of short term versus long term. But right now, for example, as we have been teaching, one of the things that are going to be very tricky with this generative AI is that nowadays students can literally completely cheat all their homework. There is no such thing as student homework anymore. ChatGPT will just be doing it, and for a professor, it's almost impossible to sort out. Except saying, I'm going to give a bad grade to all the students who give me a copy without spelling mistakes. Because if there is no spelling mistakes, I'm going to assume that it was like written by ChatGPT, this sort of things. But and having people who have been potentially miseducated because of this gap may create problems. But for companies, I think in terms of generative AI, the people who are really taking risk with this sort of technologies are more like the companies who go all into vibe coding. So that's the sort of things where it hasn't even started yet in supply chain. So people are still, in my understanding, it's very superficial use. The few use where it's used, it is really massive low-hanging fruits, quick wins, no question. And the more dangerous / elaborate / impacting uses, as far as I understand, have not even started yet.
Let me comment on this couple of ideas. So one is, if we compare like 25 years ago when the internet started, there was a lot of companies that would basically block the internet, right? So there people were not allowed to use the internet because they were kind of, maybe they kind of read the news and they do not do their work or do their private stuff. And nowadays it's normal and it's adding a lot of value. Now, a lot of big companies now also block ChatGPT or other large language models. So this is kind of the worst thing that you can do, right? So you need to make sure that you educate your people how to use these models. You need to make sure that you kind of provide an environment where they can use it without kind of uploading secrets and so on and so on. But at the end, what you want to have a curious organization that is learning and kind of exploring the opportunities. Same with students, right? So when I teach, I kind of ask my students, hey, please solve this question or this task or whatsoever also with ChatGPT. And then kind of find out where it's going the right way and where it's going the wrong way, right? So to kind of enable them and even encourage them to use it, because otherwise we will never learn what is possible.
Yes, and I think companies blocking like LLMs are going to rediscover what happened in the I would say in the early 2000s, where people would just connect to the internet through their mobile device and the edge connection at the time.
Yes, fully agree.
Just because at some point they would just circumvent the limitation because it's so annoying. And I think people would just do that with their mobile phone. If you block it at the corporate level, people would just use their personal account on their smartphone and do it, because again, for clerical tasks, the productivity gains are so great that resisting it is like extremely difficult. It's very difficult to justify to someone that this person should spend 3 hours doing something that is hyper tedious when there is a tool that can do it in 5 minutes. And then as soon as this person feels morally justified for this one thing, then obviously the temptation is very great to use it for all the other things. But Yes.
Sorry, well, this actually ties back to something you both touched on, which was, again, the short-term v long-term perspective. And in the short term, Knut, start with you. What do you see as the primary positive impacts that this has had in the supply chain context? Generative AI, excuse me.
So what we see a lot, and that is already working these days, is if you don't understand something, then you use it, so to say, as a very smart Wikipedia, right? So you basically look things up, and with this you learn. We see now cases where you start, as Joannes also said, that kind of very, I would say, administrative, repetitive tasks, where you could then have, I would say, a smart robot process automation, right? So RPA kind of struggled with, if the processes would change a bit, then you would have to reprogram the process, so to say. And this is where you see kind of early wins. The vision, if I kind of go a bit ahead, I would have for an GenAI application is that if we think about kind of typical processes in supply chain, then they're well defined, right? They are kind of, from an algorithmic point of view, clearly defined. But then reality tells a different story. So what I always see is that people find ways around it, right? So kind of either manual changes of numbers, or they don't trust each other, or whatsoever. So there's a lot going on where the result is not as we would expect. And here comes the power of the language models, because this is something that you don't see the reasons why processes do not work in the data. You just see that, oh, my forecast accuracy is going down. Why is that? Because this person changed the numbers. And then you don't understand why this person changed the numbers. So why not having something like a supply chain avatar or a digital Joannes in discussion with this person that changed the number, and then kind of slowly finding out, hey, what's going on? What's the real reason? And then you find out the real reason is they don't trust the planner because they want to serve their customers. And in the past, there were 2 or 3 instances where they run out of stock. And then you start to kind of fix this one by building trust or by increasing inventory. And this is, I feel, where the models can add a lot of value.
That's a good that's almost like a tool that you're using to improve a process indirectly. So, for example, like a discursive interaction, like why did you do that, et cetera, et cetera. And Joannes, I'm just curious, are there any other examples of like plugging LLMs in and they just change a process completely by themselves, largely unattended in supply chain? Because in Knut's example, like you're interacting, you're guiding, it's a guided discussion.
Yes, for example, if you want to think about quality of service, many companies have various flavors of net promoter score, and they would survey their clientele once a week, once a month, or something. Potentially, if they are B2C, they would just take a sample. And the traditional way was to have multiple choice questions, and that's very low resolution. And why do you do that? Because if you do it any other way, you end up with 200, 500 answers, and it's very hard to do anything with it. But if you have LLMs, suddenly you don't have to, I would say, force your clientele into giving you feedback according to your understanding of their pain, because maybe the client will complain about something that you've not even realized that was a problem, and it can be something very, very strange, like I received a device, but it was an American plug instead of a British one. And it's okay. So I managed to solve the problem on my own, but it was annoying. And you see, that's the sort of things where if you have like a checklist for was the product like damaged, yes or no, it's not damaged, but it's a problem. So you see, here traditionally anything that was like freeform was a pure pain to deal with. Same thing if you were to ask your suppliers and whatnot. And so I think here you can imagine systems where you can have things that are much more freeform for your partners, and then have LLMs just go through that to crunch and get potentially statistics out of that without making, I would say, hard assumption on framing the problem very narrowly, so that you have your nice boxes, and you would have that will be ticked, and that's a way to get a lot more information. So that would be one example where having an LLM lets you rethink, I would say, quite deeply the way you would do that. You would do a process.
And another example to build on this, I would see in everything that is related to creating dashboards. So if you you implement a new system, and then kind of a big chunk of the time is to define, hey, what do you want to see, right? And then it's kind of hard-coded or more or less hard-coded, and then everyone has new ideas. Just imagine a world where you basically talk to your system, you talk to your LLM, and you say, hey, I want to see this and this and this, and please highlight this and this on the x-axis, this on the y-axis. And then you see that. If you like it, it's going into standard. If not, then you go on and you refine it and you refine it. So the user interface, I see the user interface will be much more an interactive, a natural language user interface, where you then kind of find the stuff that you need. In addition, the system should then also provide stuff. Let's say you ask for one KPI and for another KPI, but you miss out, for example, the service level, which is super important in supply chain. Then this digital Joannes, coming back to that example, could then say that, hey, it's interesting that you look into these two, but hey, did you also look into service? And did you look into how service correlates, for example, with inventory? And is there something cooking that you should start?
That's very interesting. At Lokad, it's very interesting because we are on this front, we are looking at the same problem, but we approach it in a very, very different way. The typical problem that we have with dashboards is that very quickly in enterprise settings, we have walls of metrics, like really tons of numbers. And the problem becomes, what am I looking at exactly? And because, for example, things would say you have lead time measured in days, and then you would say, is it business days or calendar days? Is it like, does this thing remove the outliers? Because, for example, if something was never delivered, does it count as infinite? Does it count as 1,000? It's some stupid. Obviously, there is plenty of conventions that goes into that. So if you say lead times, days, there is like tons of things. And the way we are, so our problem, it's the same sort of things. It's not, the way we approach it is not so much about, I would say, dynamically composing a dashboard, but rather, can we on the fly generate extremely detailed documentation by having the LLM look at all the code that led to this number, and to be able to compile in English documentation of all the stuff that matter. And when I say lead times, what is exactly the scope? What have we filtered? Do we exclude things? Or is there any kind of shenanigans where we correct that up or down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And how far in the past are we looking at? And because our experience was, we have those walls of metrics, and maintaining the documentation is so hard because anything that is touched, the filters are changed, and then people are constantly thinking that it's not like they are really missing any number, but it's more like they don't know what they're looking at, and they are not sure of what it means. And at least at Lokad, for us, that is really the battle that we're fighting, is that we are kind of drowning in in dashboards and numbers, and the semantic of that is really tough.
And let me throw in another idea that I just recently explored with a client. And there was kind of from lean manufacturing, we know the 5 Why strategy, or everyone raising kids knows the 5 Why.
Yes.
So you kind of ask, why is that happening? And then next level, why is that happening? Until you really find the root cause, right?
Yes.
And this is kind of super powerful. And this is also something kind of building on your kind of walls of KPIs. If there's something going wrong, then to use, so to say, the large language model to kind of go deeper, until you really find out, hey, this is the reason. Here we need to work on, and here we need to change whatever setting, parameter, inventory or so to improve the overall performance.
Yes, absolutely.
Again, I think the way people often perceive LLMs or any new technology, and certainly AI, is it's a tool to be used, but the way you talk about it, listening to you talk about it, Knut, you very much frame it like, this is a colleague you interact with. This is, again, it's like a digital member of my team. Would that be a fair description of your perspective?
Yes, it is.
Well, what does that change then if you don't see it as a tool versus a colleague?
So let's first think about if we hire a new colleague, let's say from university, what happens? So he or she arrives, right, and then is trained. We kind of have a mentor. We have a coach. Then the new colleague first does more kind of simple tasks, and then kind of more complicated tasks. The colleague has in the beginning probably can decide to buy whatever stuff for 10 euros, and then over the years it's going to 100,000 and so on euros. So we are kind of developing this colleague, right? No one expects from a colleague that is joining new that they know everything. Interestingly, when we implement a planning tool, for some reason, the planner expects the tool to do magic, right? And know everything. So why not having something like a GenAI bot, so to say, as a digital colleague? And this bot, we also need to train. So we need to train the business context. We need to train kind of specifics about a certain customer that always complains, or that we don't follow loudest shout first served, and so on and so on. So we basically train the model more and more to understand our specific context. The model comes with enormous speed, the capability of handling and analyzing data that is just not possible for human. And if we then kind of combine it with this specific knowledge, then we have a real digital colleague where I would foresee a future where kind of the experienced business people then talk to this model or to this bot like to a colleague, and with this kind of improve their performance or the quality of their decisions significantly. So they don't need to do the kind of the boring stuff, kind of copying stuff in Excel and out of Excel. And they're presented with kind of, hey, did you think about this? Did you think about this? Did you look into this? And then combine it with their business experience and knowledge, and with this come to a much better decision.
Well, again, it occurs to me, because I like the metaphor, or it's a simile, because it's like, so it's a simile. Thing is, if you take that example of a mentor, so someone joins day one and you want to train them, you don't pick just anybody to be a mentor, because obviously there's a skill set required to effectively teach. We're all teachers here. There's a skill set required to be able to teach a student and to teach a new member of a team. What do you see as the important skills then for that mentor to train an LLM? Like, do you have to be, let's say, for example, an expert coder or computer scientist to be able to do that?
So you need to be open, you need to be curious, you need to be transparent. And you need to, a good mentor is not only training, but a good mentor is also open for feedback, right? So it's kind of a give and take. And that is what you need to do. So I started to train, so to say, a digital copy of myself.
Yeah. Digital Knut, yeah.
A digital Knut, exactly. And that is also something where at some point in time I was super frustrated, because I felt that, this digital Knut does not know anything.
I don't know me.
I don't know me, exactly. And then I realized that, if that would be a real colleague, I would also be maybe frustrated, but then I would continue. I would continue to coach and to develop. And this is then what I realized, hey, with a digital colleague, that is exactly my digital self, my digital Knut also needs to be developed. Same thing.
Yes. And I think here we are touching one of the very deep limitation of GenAI, is that right now LLMs are not learning anything. Technically, what you have is pre-trained model. So essentially, you dump a sizable fraction of the whole internet into the training, the entire Wikipedia and more. And then you have a model that is static. The parameters do not change. So when you have ChatGPT, for example, ChatGPT has no memory whatsoever. It's completely stateless. So the only thing that you can adjust is the context. Fortunately, over the last year, the contexts have grown enormously. Latest model of, for example, GPT-5, at the API level, we are talking now of a context window that is 400,000 tokens. So it's absolutely enormous. You can't use all of it for input. You can only use, top of my head, something like 270,000 tokens as inputs. The rest is used for reasoning, because you need to have space for the reasoning that takes place afterwards. But that's one of the tricky thing about the current paradigm for this dominant theory in AI, is that we have essentially models that have like crystallized intelligence, kind of, but it's completely static. Then you can contextualize more, but the thing cannot really become more intelligent. It is just it will still be exactly as intelligent that it is from day one, but you can enrich the context. And so that's still, and for example, that means that who is going to maintain that context? In technical term, people speak about knowledge flywheel. Who is maintaining that? Is it the LLM itself who is maintaining the flywheel? That's so the LLM could decide to add nuggets of information or remove from its own bank of information. ChatGPT does that, by the way. If you let the tool, it will record nuggets about you. If you tell him, oh, I am this age, I live this place, it will store that. And then it will, afterward, when you repeat the call to the tool, it will re-inject this context. But the problem is that there is, adding too much things in the context then becomes a distraction. So you see, that's the sort of things that, and that's the sort of problems that are not, again, we don't have any learning, it's not properly solved, is that you can add hundreds of pages of context, but the LLM, if to answer any question has to load all this context can actually worsen their performance, because it's like a massive distraction with irrelevant trivia for any given task. So that's, for me, that's something where it's still a massive problem to really be able to have an LLM agent as a true colleague. Is this you have this thing where, in a way, it's super intelligent in some ways, and others is extremely stupid because it cannot learn anything ever, at least in the current AI paradigm.
Well, again, even if you were to take both of these statements at face value, there would still be some tasks that you could entrust to this digital colleague and some that you might want to keep firmly in the hands of people. So, Knut, to you first. What are some tasks that you would feel comfortable pretty quickly delegating, to use your own language, delegating to a digital colleague, and some that you would say, no, you want to keep people in charge of that?
So I'm not so sure whether I would delegate anything 100%. I would still have the human in the loop, right? So
overseeing.
I think that is exactly that is super important. But to give you an example, kind of when we did diagnostic, or still do diagnostics, what happens is that you collect a lot of data, you do some analysis, but then in terms of supply chain, what do? You kind of interview people, right? So you want to understand, hey, how do you do your forecasting? How do you do your demand review process, SNOP, and so on and so on? That does not necessarily tell the full truth, right? It's like a Gemba walk in manufacturing, where you kind of, if you talk people in a meeting room, they will explain the nice and shiny process. If you then are on the shop floor, it looks completely different. Yeah. So this is something where I can see that the GenAI can add a lot of value, kind of observing, so to say, the process. Just imagine you have a demand review meeting, right? What often happens in demand review meetings is that the deck is not well prepared. The agenda is not really followed. There's no actions defined. There's a lot of people connected, but video off, mic off,
not contributing.
Do not contribute. There's only a few people kind of talking, and that is something. If you would then just have kind of your GenAI bot listening into this, and then providing feedback to the facilitator of, hey, do this, do this, do this. Here something is wrong. Here something is wrong. And you can also massively parallelize this, right? So you can kind of, if that happens with you have whatever 200 demand planners, and you can kind of coach all the 200 demand planners in terms of, hey, look, here you could do better, here you could do different, and this in a kind of a way that you would also do if you want to coach people, right? So that is something where I feel that these models can really help. Where we see applications today, if you kind of move on to procurement, for example, this is something where the agents can already add value. Think about kind of your long tail spend, where you have kind of a lot of kind of small categories, so to say, or products. and they're never checked properly because you just don't have the time, you don't have the people. Now, having an agent kind of doing the analysis, doing a comparison, and then kind of triggering a renegotiation of the prices, this is something that can add value as a low-hanging fruit already today. And this is to a certain extent also possible with, I would say, an unsupervised way. Kind of, again, the budget is very relatively low. You would never do that for whatever the items that is a very high value for your spend, but for the long tail that starts, and then you kind of go into the other categories as well.
Well, the example that you just described there of your AI bots supervising meetings off the air, you explained an experiment that you'd done simulating that exact thing. So you're not being theoretical. You mentioned that you'd done it like 20 times or something like that. You had simulated different exchanges. Can you explain that example again?
Exactly. So what I did is I basically created a kind of a synthetic data set, both from a forecast perspective. So I created basically a synthetic company, right, to experiment with so to say real data. And then I kind of went through the analysis to understand, hey, what's going on here with this forecast, and can you do a forecast as well, and what's going on with the pricing? Is there some correlation with promotions, and so on and so on. So the analysis part. And what I then did is I I kind of also created a manual input in this data set, and I created it in a way that I had. I took out 2 demand planners. One demand planner was kind of increasing the forecast. And the other demand planner was improving the forecast. So classical KPI forecast value add for the first one was very bad, for the second one was good. And what I then did is I kind of talked to, and there was ChatGPT, I talked to ChatGPT in the voice mode and claimed that I'm demand planner 1. Because I wanted to understand how would the model react. That model had all the context on the company, on the SKUs, on the customers, on the fluctuation, on the increase of the positive bias of the first demand planner. And that was quite interesting, because I did then kind of complain about the supply chain people that would not understand me and would never deliver, and the production people anyhow do not produce what I want, and that's why I need to increase the forecast. So I kind of overdid it a bit, but kind of reflecting reality that all of us see every day. What then happened is very interesting, that the ChatGPT, so the bot, kind of started to listen, and then started to kind of slowly recommend what to do different. And that I found super interesting. It was not immediately telling that, hey, your forecast is stupid, you're always increasing by 30%, that doesn't make sense. So it started kind of very slowly and very carefully to give hints and tips and tricks. So that was very interesting. Another experiment I did was that I basically created 20 transcripts of a demand review meeting. So not a real, but a kind of also made up, with problems that, as I earlier said, that kind of mic was not on, video was not on, people were not contributing, and so on. And then kind of I trained the model in a way that I explained, that's kind of the part of the digital Knut, I explained how I would see a kind of a best-in-class demand review meeting, what should be in, what should not be in, what issues we typically see, and so on and so on. So it was kind of a long training. And then I asked the model to evaluate what's going wrong here. And then I even defined a maturity model where I said that, hey, this is kind of very basic to best-in-class. And then I asked the model also to rate what my transcript would be in terms of maturity. And that was amazing, right? So kind of the rating was very good. The findings were very consistent. It would have been, I would have probably have the same findings, probably because I trained the model. So kind of, and if you now imagine that you have this bot, so to say, kind of listening in the real meetings, and I know that is not always possible, but then kind of reflecting on, hey, what did I hear? That is creating such a boost in efficiency. Just imagine like 20 people being connected and 15 off video, off mic. They don't need to connect. There's no need, right? So kind of what can you do with this time saved? So there's a lot we can do to kind of help to improve. And then it's interesting if you think about you're not doing only a diagnostic, but as you already have the context, you can immediately go into continuous improvement. because you kind of talk to people with your knowledge, with, so to say, the digital supply chain expert in the back. Then you can immediately start to kind of go into continuous improvement, which is, I feel, super, super interesting.
There's definitely a product there for you to sell. I think people would pay for that, actually. Are you accepting investors?
They would pay for the digital Knut, yeah. So I'm not yet at the product level, but
Oh, for real?
I'm
Okay, right.
I'm experimenting.
Okay, cool. Joannes, what do you think about this?
I believe that it will be in probably in some form a future that will come to pass. Either if it's with the current paradigm of LLMs right now, the main problem is what it's technically called like the data flywheel or knowledge flywheel, which is the LLM cannot learn, so the LLM must decide how to split bits of knowledge and store them for later use. That is a problem that is, I would say, not properly solved right now, because it would make and tomorrow we could even consider a descendant or an alternative theory to LLMs where and that would be probably the preferable options where learning is baked in. But back to the case is the idea that there could be value in having passive listening through the company, just auto-archiving things and organizing so that just think of ideas are being exchanged and you have an automation that just update your library of insights and understanding for the current like mind map of the company. That would have, a gigantic value. Right now, we have approximation of that, which is approximation would be I record 2 hours of meetings and I can, with an LLM, produce very clean meeting notes. That's nice. It works. It's very useful. That saves time. It is not something that you can then later on invoke as readily. The LLM would have to literally rescan everything to find whether this specific point was discussed. It's unless you're asking it to do it, it will not, I would say, on its own click connections between this was discussed, this was also discussed in 2 different meetings. We have contradiction or something. It could, if you ask the LLM to look for something specific when in those documents, it might do that. But you see, we have, and fundamentally, this is part of this sort of learning process that is absent. Is that it's again, there is no such thing of haha moments because again, we have a model that is static. It can only process through its context window linearly. It does that with I would say, a static, rigid intelligence that is extremely capable in very inhuman ways. But but this like a learning, again, it goes very deep and it presents some limitations. One thing where, for example, it's very strange, but for this data management, I suspect those models will get better automatically, irrespective of the technology in the future. And the reason is it's going to get better for the exact same reason that if you are asking now ChatGPT to compose a prompt for you, it's much better than 2 years ago. But why is that? It's not because the technology has evolved. On this front, it is not the difference. The difference is that there are now tons of examples on the web of good prompts who have been fed back into the model. And because there is like again hundreds of thousands of people have been posting their tips and tricks on the good prompting strategy, because ChatGPT is reingesting that as part of their training, which is a one-time thing that happens at the beginning. ChatGPT is now quite good at suggesting high-quality prompts, which was absolutely not the case 2 years ago, because there was no such literature on the web. So when it comes to knowledge management, if enough people post online enough tips on what counts as good tidbits of knowledge, etc., I suspect that those tools will kind of get better just because of they will integrate many heuristics.
Yes, and let me build on your example of you have the meeting notes. Let's stay with the demand review meeting, right?
Yes.
So you have the meeting notes, and I would also not expect now the that the bot kind of knows everything, and that's why kind of coming back to this idea of the digital Knut or the digital Joannes or digital Conor, that
The handsome.
by that you kind of start to kind of then, as a human in the loop, you have the transcript, and then here this goes wrong, this goes wrong, this goes wrong, this goes wrong. So you build so to say the context, and you fill the context more and more and more and more. And then after you did this 10 times, the model can already spot all of the stuff. And this is kind of the classical 80-20, right? So in my experience over the last 25 years, having worked with many clients,
Yes.
80% is always the same thing, right? And you can train that. And then you have the special cases where you then kind of put additional context in there. I would agree that it does not spit out that, for example, hey, do we need this demand review meeting at all? There would not be a result. But to improve the performance and to improve not only the structure of the meeting, but then the result, and with this having a better performing supply chain, I think this is something that is that will be possible soon.
Yes, but when I was referring to heuristics, for example, at Lokad, part of the prompts that we have included now when we summarize those sort of meetings, again for things that are planning related, we are adding in the prompts hints such as whenever a date or a price in $euro is mentioned, just isolate it, pay very close attention in the final memo. You want to, so we are doing it in a 2-pass when we want to create a high quality memo. We say, scan the discussion, and whenever there is a date, you must stop, you must pause, you must see if there is a call to action attached to the date. So it's like a heuristic way of thinking, and then you say whenever there is again a financial amount that is mentioned, again what are the stakes, etc. So we are giving to the LLM as part of the prompt tips to identify the things that are truly very useful. Okay, that's the Lokad recipe. And now we can imagine that Lokad published that, on the web through this episode like that or something. And then you have like hundreds of thousands of people who are on their own also publishing their tips and tricks. In this sort of meetings, here is the list of stuff that if you want to have a very good prompt to give you a summary of the meeting, here is the tips and tricks that you need to remember for this type of meetings. These are the things that truly matter. And that's why I say that I suspect that the technology in terms of knowledge flywheel will progress, just because people are actually posting tips and tricks on how do I produce a very effective, I would say, meeting notes with the call to actions neatly organized at the top and these sort of things. But we're still at the technological core problem that is not solved is how do you manage knowledge at scale. Right now what we have is the closest approximation is RAG, retrieval augmented generation, but it is still very crude, and it do not scale very well, because again in a large company you will get very quickly a mass of knowledge that exceeds the LLM capacity, even if it doesn't exceed its token window, because again, token windows now are very long. If you throw hundreds of pages of stuff that is quasi-irrelevant, you do not get very good performance with the LLM. So you need to have something that is better. There is plenty of ways to duct tape the situation, such as doing a linear scan, multiplying pass, do one first pass to remove all the stuff that are irrelevant. But all of that is like duct tape around the fact that learning is a second-class citizen that do not really exist in the current paradigm.
Well, thank you. To get back to, I think, the human side of this, because it's something that I really want to dig down on. Knut, so an example and then a question. So, for example, you take this profession, like what's happening right now. You're lovely to talk to on camera. You're lovely to talk to off camera. Some people are lovely to talk to off camera, but if you put a camera and a microphone in front of them and they know they're being recorded, they get shy. It changes the atmosphere. It changes the environment. It changes their willingness to buy in and participate, because they know there's a permanent record of everything I say. And now, if you take that exact same phenomenon and you apply it into a demand planning meeting where people know there's an AI tool listening to everything, recording everything, analyzing everything, archiving everything, and possibly determining performance metrics off of everything that's said. Do you see that being possibly a problem for people to fully buy in and participate? Question mark.
For the first meeting, yes. For the second meeting, half, and then it diminishes.
Okay.
And why am I saying that? If you think about the lean way of doing Gemba walks, what that is basically, you go down to the shop floor and you observe the manufacturing process, assembly process, and so on. Right? When you do that, and there is someone kind of assembling whatever product, and the lean master is observing, then in the first observation, it's very, very clear that you kind of, you try to do everything at the best because you want to show that you know that stuff. It's very interesting if you kind of come back the next day, and if you come back the next day and the fourth day and the fifth day, this kind of being or sticking to the process completely diminishes. And then they're back to their normal habits, right? So the first day might kind of show only whatever an issue here or there, and then in the fifth day, and that is what I kind of experienced myself, kind of doing this in shop floor environments. Same thing in if as a consultant now, kind of connecting to these meetings, right? So you say that, hey, here we have now Knut joining. Knut is listening in to understand what's going on, right? And then you kind of feel, especially if you talk afterwards to the head of supply chain or head of demand planning, that the first meeting then went relatively good, and then you just kind of reconnect, and then kind of people realize that that's now normal, and then you see what's going on. What is not yet clear is kind of how you can convince people that this bot is not doing bad, right?
Yeah, well, we'll come to that. Yeah,
and one way might be that you kind of create something like a supply chain avatar, right? So the supply chain avatar, you're a good-looking man, right? So would look like you, and then people kind of build trust.
The thumbnail.
People build trust and then start to talk to the avatar of you in a normal way, so to say, right? And there is still, I'm sure that there is a lot of people out there that would not do that and would not agree to talk to you. So that will still be the case.
Well, that would be their loss. Joannes, again, about the idea of guardrails, you hinted at that there, and that's something that I've been waiting to get to. The idea of, again, incorporating technology, but ensuring safety, security. You mentioned, again, a core example that's been discussed here is you have client meetings, you're talking to demand planners, you're doing an analysis or a diagnostic. There's a lot of sensitive information that's being discussed, bandied about, numbers, dates, values. People might understandably have concerns about security, guardrails, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I was teaching my students in computer science, that was almost 20 years ago, because at the time email was still a little bit new. I was telling them, treat every email that you write as if it was going to be made forever public, because the reality is that once you've sent the email, you have no control on what happens to this email. You've effectively created a copy, somebody else has a copy, it can be forwarded, and ultimately at the time I was saying, assume that all your emails are going to be dumped onto Usenet, so people don't know what Usenet is anymore. But let's say at the time it was the equivalent of Reddit. So just assume that all your emails, when they are going to be dumped in Reddit, and thus write accordingly. And yes, and we are entering a very strange world where I think it will be very difficult, I think, in the next 20 years to resist the pool of having passive listening tools that just record everything. Because I can see so many productivity gains that will come with that it will be very difficult to resist that. Again, a company will be, there will be companies say we embrace that, and then they will realize that they are saving a lot of time. Again, I'm talking of 20 years, not something that will happen the next 2 years. So it's going to be very strange. But again, I suspect that emails, as we are practicing it today, would feel to people, if you're going back in the 70s, the idea that what was like private conversation was always at risk of being sent to the national press would have sounded very, very crazy. You know, if you are a man of the 1970, yes, you can write a letter to someone, and this someone is very indelicate, and this letter is actually copied on the national press. That would be extravagant. That was, you know, the sort of things that would be happening to a tiny few people in maybe once in their lifetime. The idea that one email that I wrote was forwarded to dozens of people I didn't even knew, it happens like all the time. You know, you don't even think about it. It just happens. People do not feel that a private message that you receive through your email, you have to ask the permission of the person who wrote this email to you to forward it. You know, if it was like a private letter written to you, that was not okay to just, you know, show this letter to third parties. That was, the mail was considered a very private thing.
Yes.
Let me comment on this couple of ideas. So coming back to the importance of training, so kind of to make sure that people are aware of kind of what is to be shared and what is not to be shared, right? And then another example, kind of we had this in the book where one of our contributors basically told the story that in his S&OP process, he wanted to invite the 3 most important suppliers. And everyone was kind of complaining, wow, we cannot invite them because then they know what our production plan is. And he was like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to share with them. Yeah. Because if they know our production plan, then they can prepare for that. And it's the 3 most important. So it's not like 1,000 of suppliers. Yeah, yeah. So here, again, with transparency helps to be better, right? So there's often a kind of a fear that, if they know what we do, yes, but if they know what we do, maybe they can prepare better, and then the overall supply chain is going to be better. Same with these models, right? But very clear, kind of, if there's really a secret, you don't want to have this next morning in the press.
Yeah, and my take is that it changed the organization. For example, again, a generation of my parents, they were working at Procter & Gamble, and they were having a quasi-military setup internally. Hierarchy was extremely strict, and I would say privacy and secrecy was paramount, and it was really information were being distributed on a need-to-know basis, and that's it. And my take is that this has evolved enormously. Procter & Gamble nowadays has nothing is nothing like what it was 50 years ago, and again, it's this sort of technology will I will say shift again the market on companies that have, you see, the way I see it is that instead of security, say if you organize yourself with maybe some limited downside on well, if everything is public, we have very little to hide because our competitive edge do not come from that. You see, so it has downside because yes, there would be situations where if you could have, you know, some keep your cards close to your chest, you know, that would be a competitive edge. But depending on the way you organize your business, you can have a business where your secrets are quite unimportant. And I think that will be just displacing the businesses more in this direction. It will be very difficult to, I think, effectively truly secure this sort of tools. You know, my take, for example, when I do audits of technological startups, I do it with no device whatsoever. I have just pen, paper, book. So I'm not going to accidentally leak anything from a company that I'm auditing when I do that, because I mean everything is analogical. So then leaking the data means stealing my notebook, and I have a very illegible handwriting, a horrible handwriting. So it's semi-obfuscated on top of that. But yes, I think overall the twist will be, I think with emails, companies have already grown. I would say have already embraced a lot more openness because they can't really operate that easily with secrets as it was the case 50 years ago. And in this age, even for example nowadays, even in this age where anybody can shoot a video and upload it on TikTok and whatnot, that creates complications. So if there are things that you don't want anybody to see, then it becomes very complicated. Many companies now approach the thing, is there is something that the public should not see, we should probably not have it, because ultimately somebody is going to upload a video about, it could be working conditions, things that are a kitchen that is dirty or something. And I think this sort of technology will push it even further, which will complicate what is your competitive edge in a world where there is very, very little secrets. So that's the sort of, I think, ongoing conversation, but that will be, fast forward 20 years, because those technologies will take a lot of time to deploy.
Well, it occurs to me again, there's the idea of guardrails. It's multifaceted. You have guardrails in terms of security, but you also have guardrails in terms of spend. And this brings to another topic that we were going to discuss earlier, but I waited. Now that we've set the table, it's that some people would make the argument that, generative AI has in fact transformed supply chain, but for the worse, and they would point to something like the generative AI value gap, the idea of enormous amounts of money being invested in Gen AI projects and very little return. In fact, a pile of purgatory is the most common state. So I'm just curious, in both your perspectives, I'll start with you, Knut, does that in any way color your perception of the transformative impact of Gen AI on supply chain?
So as we discussed earlier, we are not yet there. So that's very important to understand. So we are still in the early phase. I heard a smart colleague saying that this ChatGPT or this LLMs, when you do a pilot, do ask the CEO of that company or business unit leader whether he or she uses ChatGPT on a daily basis. And with this, basically knows what is possible and what is not possible. And that I found super intriguing, because if the boss has an idea of what's possible, what's not possible, then you can be sure that either there is no pilot set up because it's too early, or the pilot is set up with the right scope and with the right expectation of impact. If that is not the case, then you will see that pilots are set up that are kind of set up to solve world hunger. And these pilots can only fail, right? So that is quite interesting if you kind of think about the pilots that are currently deployed. A lot of people still kind of mess around and they confuse GenAI and AI and digital and algorithms. So it feels like it's the new word that you need to kind of always use. And then everything that you do is now GenAI. And that's just not true. So if you then kind of bring it down to, hey, where can it really, really add value? And what is possible, what is not possible, then we will also see, I'm sure that we will see impact in the next couple of years. Another thought is that very often I see that the idea of impact is kind of too local. If you think about supply chain, the biggest impact of a proper work in supply chain is still availability. What is availability? Availability is higher margin, higher revenue. Still, a lot of people feel that supply chain is only cost and inventory, right? So you need to kind of bring everything together end to end, and with this, look into your impact, and then you also see, I would assume, a boost in the overall performance.
Joannes, we've discussed generative AI value gap before, so your thoughts?
Oh, I think it's a perfect blockchain replacement. But more seriously, I think like all those buzzwords, there is usually some technological tidbits that is genuine. But my take is that being part of this world of enterprise software vendors is that the purchasing processes of large companies for enterprise software is just dismal. This is crazy. And so a lot of money is wasted right and left, but GenAI is, the sad thing is that GenAI just happened to be on what it happens to be wasted on. If we didn't have GenAI, the money would be wasted on another buzzword. It's not GenAI that create the waste, is that we have dysfunctional, I would say, dysfunctional culture with regards to the acquisition of digital technologies in general, and tons of money is wasted. And it happens that most of it is going to be wasted on the buzzword of the day. But again, the point that I want to make is that there is a causality, an arrow of causality, and the causality is not GenAI is creating the waste. It's the purchasing process is dysfunctional, thus money is wasted. And as a corollary, what is it wasted on? It's wasted on GenAI. 2 years ago or 3 years ago, it was wasted on blockchain. 5 years ago, it was wasted on big data. 10 years ago, it was wasted on data mining. You know, it's again, it's. I think that the problem is the culture, and you were pointing out. You see, for example, when you say that the boss of the business unit is playing with ChatGPT, for me, this is really the key thing is mechanical sympathy.
I knew you would say it.
Are you kind of, can you feel in your guts what the damn thing can do and cannot do? And same thing with, for example, blockchain, that would be cryptos. Have you ever purchased Bitcoin, used Bitcoin, spent Bitcoins? Do you realize how those things are actually working, what works well, what do not work well, and what not? And yes, and my message is that if you have no I would say intuitive understanding of that. There is this term that comes from Robert Heinlein novel, which is A Stranger in Strange Land.
Yes.
You know, to grok. If you cannot grok a little the technology, this is not good. And I think GenAI is exactly that. You need to be able to grok what it can do, have this intuitive understanding, and then it will be kind of self-evident if you're about to waste a lot of money or not. And unfortunately, again, we are back to the dismal process. The process end up with an RFP, 600 questions. We are on the receiving ends of these sort of things. And then we have questions like, is your the room that you use for your fire archive, for your fax archive, is it fireproof? That's a question that we received like 1 month ago. That was
RFP, right? Yeah.
And then
Excellent.
okay, that's great.
But by the way, that brings me. So I agree, and that brings me to another observation that is quite interesting. It's not related to GenAI, but the selection process indeed of software is so strange. I always ask my clients kind of why do you need to have these 500 specs, right? Because all software companies by default will cross everything, because a software company basically kind of sells a vision and not reality. And then you kind of go into the shiny, glossy meetings of the software vendor where they promise everything. I'm sure you are much better. and then you kind of select based on the glossy presentation. I always ask them, let's just assume you want to buy a new car. Do you buy you a new car by watching a 30-second YouTube video?
Yes.
Probably no one will do that. No, I want to sit in the car. I want to touch it. I want to drive it, right? Why don't you do that with your software? Why don't you do just a kind of a proof of concept where you kind of show and kind of prove, like in the name, that it's working?
Yes.
And that's quite interesting. So I fully agree. And this comes back to the initial discussion that we had on kind of capability building. We need to make sure that people understand kind of roughly what is in.
Yes.
So all of us teach, so we need to teach even more practical supply chain. And we need to also bring this to the board, right? So that's why we did our book, Source to Soul, to kind of bring all that stuff to the board level and make sure that they understand, they have the narrative, they have the story, what is working, what is not working, and where's the impact.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, that actually, again, brings, for the record, I actually had written down JV, mechanical sympathy. I knew you would say that, so I was waiting. I was going to tee you up to talk about it, but we've known each other a while now.
Yes.
Well, again, this then brings somewhat towards the end, but two key questions. One is about, let's say, the boots on the ground person who engages with AI, and then the board level who engages with AI. So, Knut, to start with the board level, how do you present the transformative value at the board level to persuade, and then how do you present the transformative value of AI boots on the ground level?
So on the board level, if you think about what language the board speaks, they think vision, they think grow, they think margin, EBITDA, and so on and so on. So this is kind of where you need to build your story to support that. Hey, that will help you. This new technology will help you to implement your vision. Right? to be better for the customer, to be better for the consumer, to be kind of more profitable. If you then kind of go down to the shop floor, here it is, so everything is true that you told the board, but then you need to make sure that you kind of also get the buy-in that this helps people in their daily life, right? Because if there's just another tool that looks like a black box that I don't understand and which makes my life even harder, that's not going to work. So it needs to make the life easier, and it needs to help people to contribute to the overall performance. That's, by the way, what you see if you kind of do the shop floor Gemba in a warehouse. The people picking, they always have 5,000 ideas how to improve, right? So it's not that they are stupid and they don't want, it's that they know, but they're often not asked what to improve. Same thing with planners, right? So you need to kind of tell the story of, hey, here we have something that helps you to be a better planner, and it makes your life easier, and it makes also your work more interesting, right? Because there's new cool stuff to explore.
Joannes, same question. How do you pitch it to the board? How do you pitch it to the ground floor?
So pitching to the board is, for me, it's 21st century is the century of the mechanization of the intellectual work. 20th century was the mechanization of the physical work. And my general take is that if you don't mechanize your armies of clerks, white-collar clerks, your competitors will just do it. And the pressure, so that means that your competitor will somehow deliver more with far fewer people and far faster, because if you have less people, you can just be faster. So that I would say the super high level take, and you have to really look on what are my armies of white collar people doing. Again, I'm really speaking about armies of clerks, etc. Because in supply chain, especially supply chain planning, there are many companies that have hundreds of people who are doing essentially they are going over the same spreadsheet like every single day. They will go through their 1,000 SKUs, and that can represent hundreds of people. So that for me is the biggest challenge. And the question is only when will those jobs be completely robotized. It's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. We can disagree if it's like 5 years from now or 50.
That was going to be my last question, actually. Thank you.
But I mean, Lokad, I am on the optimistic end. I know Knut thinks that it will go through a massive transition or maybe a very, very long period of improving the life of those people. But I would say the status quo, we can probably both agree on the status quo is very unsatisfying. And
Yes.
And some companies somewhere will manage to do better than the status quo. So that's my take, and that would mean not satisfying for the people. I would say that are much more operational. It's really about trying to. I mean, obviously, Lokad because we robotize. It is a tough discussion, but fundamentally, it's are you willing to embrace something that will make your job a lot more challenging, but also a lot more interesting. You see, because because you see, this going through those drudgery of spreadsheets descent is some kind of comfort, but it is also incredibly boring. And so the message that I have is that if you're super comfortable in your, I would say, extremely boring tasks, this is not a good thing. You should probably, but if you have, the willingness to challenge, to do something that is a lot more interesting, to elevate your work, then that's an opportunity of a lifetime to be part of the revolution that will have mechanized the thing, and then you will be part of the people who are doing a much smarter thing, but just a level above the mundane automation. Again, that is part of the Lokad vision, which is we want to robotize the task and then have people supervising the automation. There is another camp we barely discuss of that, which is take the people, make them vastly more productive. And that's I would say 2 ways that I see as valid perspective to break the status quo of this drudgery of our expert spreadsheets.
Well, Knut, and it's customary to give the closing thought to the guest. could you perhaps just expand there a bit on, what is the steelman perspective that you have there? Like, Joannes seems to suggest that it might be a little bit more, or like AI taking over the decision-making process might be a lot more abrupt than your position. But for people who are not familiar with your position, how do you see the near-term and middle-term evolution of this technology?
So my hope is, so let me give you two versions: the optimistic and
Okay.
the pessimistic version. So the optimistic version is that the models will be better. So the models will be able to learn via context or kind of new inventions whatsoever, and with this we will make life of planners much simpler and the decision quality much better.
Yes.
By the way, which also will lead to kind of being intellectual much more challenged, right? Which not all people will like, and this will probably happen in the next 5 years.
Okay.
Right. So that's the optimistic view. Now the pessimistic view, pessimists are always kind of experienced optimists. Is if I look back the last 25 years, kind of before McKinsey, I worked in a startup where we did planning software, right, for consumer electronics, and the quality of the software and the decisions and so on that we had back then was now in retrospective amazing. I still have a lot of clients, they are not even near that we were like 25 years ago. So having this in mind, I would then say the pessimist says that we will get there, but probably in 20 years.
Okay. So we've had the optimistic, the pessimistic. The apocalyptic will be Skynet tomorrow, next week. Would that be appropriate? Huh?
Oh, Skynet will not happen, but not as an event anyway.
Well, if you're watching this in the future, you can send me a message, let me know. I don't have any more questions, gentlemen. I've taken up everyone's time. Joannes, thank you for joining me. Knut, you've been lovely. Thank you very much for joining us in studio. And to everyone else, I say, get back to work.